Close to the Russian border, a troubled region becomes a scene of utter devastation.
It was a shocking scene. It was such a contrast to see the beauty of the lovely summer's day, sunflowers, and yet in amongst all of this were bodies, pieces of aircraft were smoking, the fires were still burning.
The site is controlled by the Russian separatists suspected of shooting down the plane. International observers are still being restricted.
I have an agreement with your minister.
The plane came down effectively in a war zone, in a contested area. This was the zone between the Ukrainians and the breakaway rebels and the Russians, and that complicated things enormously.
Tonight, crash site chaos. Rebels and villagers pick through remains while investigators are kept at bay.
For the rebel forces, it was not long before they realised that they'd made this shocking error, shooting down a civilian aircraft.
The Russian-backed rebels wouldn't allow any international teams in to investigate the crash or collect the remains and the possessions and start putting together evidence as to what actually occurred.
Very quickly, Julie Bishop was in New York at the United Nations trying to get a resolution that would call for the rebels to allow complete access to recover the bodies and to begin the investigation to find out who was responsible.
It is in Russia's power to call off the separatists so that we have access to the site. So let us get on with it.
We couldn't get Russia over the line, so I arranged a meeting with the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. I had on the table all of the newspapers from Australia, and they had photographs of the Maslin children. And I said, "You're a father. How could you possibly deny these children and their families justice?" He began to cry, which surprised me.
The United Nations Security Council is considering a resolution drafted by Australia that would demand access to the crash site.
And then it came to the vote, and I still didn't know whether the Russian ambassador had instructions from Moscow to veto or support it.
The hands went up in unison, all 15 countries, and Australia's Foreign Minister had lobbied hard for every one of them.
We had a unanimous resolution. The international community was behind us.
Dutch investigators have confirmed what the world already knew. A Russian surface-to-air missile shot down Malaysia Airlines flight MH17.
A little more than a year after the disaster, the Dutch Safety Board did release its findings and they said MH17 was shot down by a Buk missile.
At 20 minutes and 3 seconds past 1, this warhead explodes to the left and above the cockpit of MH17. About 800 preformed fragments perforate the aeroplane.
The final report of the Joint Investigation Team found that the Buk missile had come from the Russian Army's 53rd Brigade and tracked its journey from Russia into Ukraine the moment it shot down the plane and then back into Russia.
They'd meant to get a Ukrainian military aircraft in the area. Instead, accidentally, they shot down MH17.
A moment's silence for the 298 victims of flight MH17. Then the vote for a tribunal to prosecute those responsible. Russia alone and defiant in its opposition.
Australia and Netherlands have publicly called for Russia to admit responsibility. Russia has denied any involvement. We're doing all we can to get Russia to admit liability and to pay compensation. We owe the families nothing less than to continue to fight for justice.